The new JC I Poke Sheldon is back at it again. Yes, Caitlin Clark's arch nemesis is back poking people in the eye, or as some people call her, logo witness, because of how Caitlin Clark was putting belt to booty cheeks her entire career. But anyway, back at it again, man. Actually caught Alyssa Pilley in the eye in Athletic Unlimited. We are about to get all the way into it, man.
Once more, she did it. Another player was jabbed in the eye by the same player that made Caitlin Clark's life miserable on the court. This time, the entire event is captured on camera. The presenters made an effort to make up for it. The referees did nothing. And now, a WNBA expert is going viral, calling on the league to take action at last.
Look at this. This is nonsense. A heinous act by a dirty player, fam. Get out of here. Look at this. Like, fam, you're small, right? And you're going against a big. Why would you go up to strip a ball? Why would you go up? You play small man ball or small player ball. As soon as that ball go low in that pocket, that's where you're at. You should be focused down there. Why are you trying to go up? Only way you're going up.
Do you believe that improved refereeing alone would resolve the issue? Or do you think the WNBA should start issuing 10-game suspensions for dirty plays? Post your response in the comments section right now. With each week that goes by, it becomes more difficult to ignore this predicament. So let's just get right to
with JC Sheldon, all right? She ended up getting Alyssa Pilley in the eye. Check this out. Oh, my goodness. Like, fam, what was she even going for? What was she even going for? Went straight for this woman's eye. Look at this.
DJ Owen Carrington, whom social media has both humorously and pointedly labeled JCI Poke Sheldon, has once again found herself in the headlines, and not for her performance on the court. During an unrivaled game, she poked Alyssa Pilley in the eye, and the footage spread across the internet almost instantly. At this stage, it feels like fans have a standing alert for any clip involving Carrington in close contact with an opponent's face. For anyone who may have missed how this narrative first began, here is a brief refresher. Carrington became one of the most discussed figures in women's basketball, not because of her scoring output or defensive metrics, but due to an incident in the 2024 season when she made direct contact with Caitlin Clark's eye during a game.
Even if you look at this play where JC Sheldon eventually swipes Caitlin in the eyeball, she had contact with her like 4 to 5 times. That should have been called a foul before the eye swipe even happened. Referees, what are you doing? Open your eyes. Open your eyes. Now, I want to call out 2 things on this play specifically. I want to call out Tina Charles because I have mad respect for her for how she handled that situation. She immediately went over to defend her teammate in JC Sheldon. Tina Charles runs over and was blocking her. And then Marina Mabrey, when she comes out of nowhere, Tina Charles immediately puts her hands up and backs away because she didn't want that to be like, I didn't do that, essentially, was what she was saying. Like, I didn't do that. And I don't think that she was trying to do that. I don't think she was trying to be physical. I think she was trying to stick up for her teammate because that's what you need to do, but de-escalate the situation, not make it something that it turned into, which is what Marina Mabrey did.
The play was captured on film. It was looked at from several perspectives. On every conceivable platform, media figures, fans, and analysts talked about it, and the league's response was very much non-existent. There will be no suspension or significant repercussions, just business as usual. The internet had to deal with the complete ridiculousness of witnessing that occur without any accountability, while Clark had to deal with an eye damage. Marina Mabrey, who was also part of multiple heated moments involving Clark during that stretch, eventually spoke publicly and conceded that she had crossed the line. In her own words, she admitted the situation went too far. She directly linked her actions to the mounting frustration of her team's repeated losses and the feeling that Clark was exposing them on the court. Mabrey explained that the constant cycle of defeat, combined with Clark's composed and relentless dominance, pushed her into what she openly described as a shameful place. That acknowledgement matters because it validated what many observers had already concluded. Those incidents were not simply accidental collisions fueled by competitive fire. They stemmed from wounded pride and an inability to counter Clark's impact through legitimate basketball adjustments. Instead of finding a strategic solution, emotions took over, and boundaries were crossed in ways that had nothing to do with fair competition. When skill and execution fail to solve the problem, the response appeared to shift toward physical frustration, eye contact gone wrong, excessive grabbing, and the kind of tactics that repeatedly surfaced during that period of Clark's career. Now, with Carrington involved in a similar situation against a different opponent in a different league, it raises an obvious question about whether the absence of meaningful consequences has allowed this pattern to continue. Nothing about the initial incident led to any meaningful change in behavior. It simply did not. And realistically, why would it? When a player commits a questionable act and faces no real consequences, the takeaway is clear: those actions are tolerated. The conduct does not disappear, it repeats itself. This time, Alyssa Peely is left dealing with an eye injury as the result. Now, consider the specifics of the play, because context matters. Carrington, a smaller defender, was matched up against a bigger opponent as the ball was fed into the post, low and tight, into a space where a smaller player has virtually no legitimate opportunity to make a clean defensive play. A disciplined defender reads that scenario and adapts accordingly. You rely on positioning. You anticipate angles. What you do not do is reach upward in an attempt to strip a pass that is already moving into an area your hands cannot realistically access without first going through the opponent's face. In that moment, the only plausible reason for a smaller defender to elevate would be to challenge something above the ball handler's head, which simply does not align with the situation, or to suggest the ball was never the true target. The path of the hand moves straight toward the face, not toward the basketball. The contact was not directed toward any space where the basketball could reasonably have been. It went straight to the face, and Peely was left doubled over, clutching her eye, while, according to reports, the game did not even pause. It continued as if nothing significant had happened. A player stood on the court in visible discomfort after taking a finger to the eye, and play simply carried on. To make matters worse, the broadcast commentary described the sequence as appearing unintentional, as though a hand striking someone directly in the eye were an unclear or debatable outcome deserving automatic benefit of the doubt. That reaction reflects the broader culture that allows these incidents to persist. It is not solely about the player committing the questionable act. It is also about the surrounding environment that quickly rationalizes it, downplays its seriousness, and shifts focus before any real accountability can take place. The broadcasters excuse it. The referees overlook it in real time. The league downplays it when discipline is supposedly reviewed afterward. And the consistent conclusion is always some variation of, nothing serious occurred. Meanwhile, the players on the receiving end are expected to absorb it and move forward. Clark endured that reality throughout much of her first 2 seasons. The eye contact incidents, the jersey pulling, the arm bars, and the level of physical play that, in virtually any other professional basketball setting, would have resulted in immediate flagrant fouls or even ejections. Yet in this context, it was often dismissed as routine competitiveness. Cheryl Reeve addressed it publicly. Stephanie White addressed it publicly. These are established, respected coaches within the sport, openly acknowledging that officiating standards needed to be strengthened because players were consistently escaping accountability for actions that should not have been tolerated. And despite those clear warnings from credible voices, no meaningful adjustment followed. Collective bargaining negotiations have placed the league in a holding pattern. The 2026 season has not even been formally secured, and operations remain in limbo as the Players Association and league officials attempt to finalize terms that satisfy both sides. Amid that uncertainty, one critical issue deserves direct attention: the inclusion of clear, enforceable penalties for intentional violations that compromise player safety within the next collective bargaining agreement. Advocates for stronger accountability are calling for 10-game suspensions without pay for deliberate actions that injure or attempt to injure another player. In a league where the regular season spans roughly 40 to 44 games, a 10-game suspension would amount to nearly a quarter of the schedule. That is not symbolic discipline. It is a meaningful sanction. Consequences at that level materially affect both compensation and competitive standing. More importantly, they alter decision-making. When frustration begins to outweigh sportsmanship in a heated moment, the knowledge of a substantial suspension and lost salary can serve as a powerful deterrent, precisely the kind of deterrent required to shift behavior in a lasting way. At present, the risk-reward equation is simple. A player can rake at someone's eye, tug a jersey, or even drag an opponent down by the hair, and the outcome typically ranges from no real discipline to a modest fine that barely registers financially. When the repercussions are that minor, the internal calculation becomes clear: act on emotion, because the fallout will be negligible. Adjust that equation, however, and behavior inevitably shifts. This is not a complex theory. It is the fundamental principle behind every effective disciplinary system. The penalty must match the gravity of the offense and be significant enough to discourage it from happening again. Hair-pulling incidents have occurred in this league, players yanked downward in a manner that has nothing to do with legitimate basketball action. In virtually any other setting, that type of conduct would be classified far more seriously. Yet it was brushed aside as a momentary lapse in temper rather than addressed with the level of accountability such behavior warrants.